Welcome to Ngosi Talk Shows. Lead from within.
Find your own voice.
Challenges we have had to overcome in 2020.
Find your own voice.
The world has become united by the unseen, knowing there are no guarantees for tomorrow.
Lead from within.
Find your own voice.
Let the world hear your voice and be filled within.
For the day has come for you to be a great leader.
The time has come to break away from the pain, distraction, experience the unthinkable.
For the day has come for you to be a great leader. Welcome to Ngosi Talk Show. Over to you, Carol Ann. Please introduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you, and good afternoon from London, UK. And my name is Carol Ann, and as the writing facilitator, what I do is I support soul-driven entrepreneurs in becoming more productive with their writing. But more importantly, they experience free-flowing writing. They experience an unlocking of the writer within, and an unmuting of their story, and getting their book written, getting their story written, because you cannot publish what isn't written. And all of this has come about through my own journey of unlocking the writer within. So I'm Carol Ann, the writing facilitator, helping you unlock the writer within. Thank you.
John Kenny, please introduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you, Nomsa. Hello, Carol Ann. Hello, everyone. I'm John Kenny, and I'm the relationship guy. Relationships have a profound impact on the quality of life that you're able to live. A 75-year study carried out by Yale University correlated your overall life well-being and quality of life with the quality of your relationships. So if you are a person that struggled to connect with people in the past in their intimate relationships, maybe you've focused a lot on a career or your business and just sort of dipped in and out of relationships in your life and never really found someone to complement your lifestyle. Maybe you've experienced lots of difficulties and ups and downs, roller coasters, or just avoided relationships because in the past they've caused you a lot of pain. Maybe your childhood issues, your relationship patterns and beliefs that you continue to carry are really affecting you. And if that's the case, you're never going to actually live the quality of life that you possibly can. And that's what makes relationships such a fundamental issue when it comes to living a happy, fulfilled and lifestyle that you like. I am John Kenny, the relationship guy, and I'm a relationship coach to successful singles who struggle with intimate relationships.
Thank you so much, John Kenny. So our topic today is different opinions in relationships and disagreeing in everything. I mean everything. Fight that leads to anger, hateful comment. And when you fight with someone and you disagreeing with everything, that ends up with a divorce, or ends up with a separation, or sometimes it can end up with basically a partner or a husband and wife living with a friend because of unforgiveness. So basically, we're just gonna thank you, John, for being here, the relationship guy. Please, Carol Ann, we're gonna start with you. Can you explain the topic before we go to John Kenny?
Explain topic. Yeah, different opinions in relationships. Disagreeing with everything. Wow, that's quite disagreeing with everything. That sounds like why are you together in the first place if you're disagreeing with everything? because there must have been some agreement that brought you together. You know, so where was that lost? I'm intrigued to explore, you know. But disagreement, it's allowing someone else to have their own opinion, and it's about not taking it personally. And the problem is, very often that's not allowed. You take it personally, or you have to be the one that's right. And so it can cause a lot of friction, a lot of hurt, and maybe that's what causes it all to fall into a pattern of disagreement, because all of a sudden you lose sight of what you did agree on, because things you can't agree on. And there was always one thing that caused a lot of disagreement between my ex-husband and I, and that was money. It was like on what we would spend the money on, you know. And I wanted to be more careful with it. He wanted to have something, you know, straight away. And so there was always this disagreement about it. And it never got to hurt but there was anger. And I guess in some respects there would be moments of silence where we wouldn't talk, because there was this anger there, this conflict. And often I would give in and go, okay, we'll go and get that. But it would cause us financial problems then. I was the one that would have to sort it out and juggle the money. So it left me feeling with a headache, basically, because I was having to constantly juggle the money. But I also felt, what's the word? Not comfortable with myself, because I wasn't standing up, and I felt I had to. And maybe it was our way of dealing with it that wasn't powerful enough. We weren't discussing it in an empowering way, you know. And I think that's something else to explore, is actually how you discuss things in a disagreement, and sometimes agree to disagree and be able to move on, because, you know, you don't need to have to agree all the time, but it is the way you deal with it. So yeah, I'm fascinated to see where this discussion ends up, or where it goes.
John?
Yeah, the first word that sprung to mind when you described the topic at the start there was destruction. It's a very destructive space for someone to be in a relationship where you are constantly disagreeing, constantly arguing, unable to come to any kind of resolution to the problems that you've got. And as I sort of said in my introduction, I would assume that would come from what you're used to with relationships. So you may found that you kind of grew up in a relationships at home, maybe where your voice was never heard, or maybe arguments were very commonplace, that nothing was ever resolved. And we get together with people in adult life generally to repeat patterns of our past, the things that we learn when we're growing up. And if you're in a relationship where you are constantly arguing and falling out and disagreeing, then I would say there's something there in your kind of relational beliefs, your relational patterns, your subconscious psyche that's, you know, you get used to that type of space, and then you recreate that in the relationships you get yourself into when you're adults. And there's things that you kind of, what does they say? The things that you fell in love with are the things that you annoy you later on in life. So we overlook a lot of things when we meet people. Again, especially if we've got a difficult way of doing relationships ourselves, we'll overlook things. We might go, oh, at the beginning we might find them quite cute and different. And as I say, that's just part of who somebody is. But actually, you're overlooking the fact that somewhere further down the line, you're actually going to find them quite annoying and irritating and intolerable. And then you're just going to find fault in whatever the person might be doing later on. And that's particularly common in people with some sort of an avoidant attachment style, because they find it very difficult to have a healthy, connected relationship with somebody. They will look for any faults or problems that they can in order to protect themselves from being in the relationship. So that's one of the things that generally I find that goes on with couples that have a tendency to argue quite a lot. They're playing out their relational patterns, but they're also playing out their attachment style. And they're looking for issues in order to create an emotional, physical, mental distance. And then that keeps them in a safe space that they're used to. So there's so many different factors which might be leading towards somebody that's in a relationship where they just continue to argue all the time and bicker and disagree. And it might, again, you speak to some people and they just go, well, I don't notice that. That's our normal. That's what we always do. And again, that's there just because that's what they're used to. But again, the word destructive, it is destructive. It's emotionally destructive. It's mentally destructive. It can be physically destructive, and very, very draining to be constantly in that space of fighting all the time.
Thank you so much, John. I like Carol Ann when she talks about silent treatment. And John as well, you talk about when someone is arguing, sometimes it could be from their childhood, which is true. For me, basically, I grew up not knowing how to argue, but when I entered the relationship, it basically started affecting me, not knowing that it is normal to argue. But when it comes to relationship, working as a love harmonist, do you know where the argument starts? Argument starts when people are booking the date. Somebody says, okay, I've noticed clients, male clients, because normally a male client is the one that takes, a male client is the one that takes the woman out. So the male client will be, where would you like to go? And the woman, instead of being honest and say, I like Chinese, or I like Indian, or anything that you like, they don't. They're like, I'm not fussed, I don't mind. So here comes the man, he chooses Indian. Turns out the Indian is the worst thing that this person likes, they don't like. So, and they go for a meal, and when they finish, and now I need feedback, find out what went on. And the man will be like, everything went well, we got along very well. And then it comes to a woman and making a phone call, how did the date go? You can never believe what he did. What did he do? Because I explained to them that the process is actually arranged through the agency. They say yes, they are listening, but they are not. So they're like, you're never going to believe what he did. I was like, what did he do? He took me to an Indian restaurant. Who chose the Indian restaurant? But he asked you that, do you want to, where do you prefer to go? You said, I don't mind. So you're just going to crucify the guy that you don't like because you didn't speak for yourself. And that's where the problem is, communication. People don't like to say their needs. They don't like to communicate their needs. That's where I find where it's very, very difficult, that you find a man, they're not communicating their needs and they expect the other person to know what they want. And you find that the woman is not communicating their needs. They find they expect the other person to know what they want. So I'm like, I'm looking for a feedback. So the feedback will be something that does not make sense. If you take my job, I'm sure one day you're going to be in my shoes and come and experience working with me. You'll be amazed what people do. Honestly, they argue because And I used to do it as well. I'm not going to say it's silly, but to me it was a big deal as well when I used to do it, when I never used to communicate. Sometimes the family will call and say, come for dinner. If I feel like I don't want to go out, I'll just say yes. And then I'll be upset with my man that, why did you say yes? Let's go for dinner. But instead of me saying, maybe, baby, we shouldn't go today, let's just stay at home, and communicating my needs or let him go on his own, I'll make it a big deal. So it'll be an argument, and I'll feel hurt that you didn't consider my feelings or how I felt. But now I don't feel that way, because when you work on yourself, you tend to speak up. When you do something, it's like, if we want to go out, if I feel like I just want to sit on the sofa and have popcorn, I just say, I'm not going out, because that's how I feel. I'm not going to just go and put my shoes to make my man happy. It doesn't work that way anymore. And he will just say, oh, okay, I was just taking you girls out. So if you feel like you want to sit down, I'm going to play a game with my friends. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Everybody's happy. But it's something that I had to learn the hard way, to speak up. Carol Ann?
I think that's right. It's about learning what it is you want and speaking up for it without fear of retribution or fear that that other person's going to walk away. Well, if they do, they do, you know, and I think that can be very often in the background, is this fear of the relationship breaking up and you not being able to cope with it breaking up and then being left on your own. So therefore, there can be an acquiescing there. So but it is knowing what it is that you want, and just being able to stand up and say, no, this is it. But it's, as you say, it comes down to communication. I know that I did expect my ex-husband to know what it was I wanted. I didn't realize at the time, but it was always, when I started on this self-discovery journey, there was this realization, well, why don't you know? You should know. Why should I have to tell you? But how could he know something that I actually didn't really know myself? And so you need again to look at yourself and say, well, what is it that is going on here that has the disagreements? What is it here that is stopping me from being powerful and standing up and saying what it is I want, or actually knowing what it is I want? And then communicating that. And it's the communication. It all comes down to communication. How are you communicating? Are you making that person wrong because they've got their own opinion, their own thoughts? Are you allowing yourself to be made to feel wrong because you've got your opinion and it doesn't agree with them? You know, that sort of flyaway, oh, but you're always, like that. Well, always? Am I always like that? Really listen to the language, and is it that throwaway comment that makes you feel even more unsettled, upset, and rebellious as well, because it can sort of go, no, I'm not, and then it just sparks and fuses even more arguments. So as John was saying, it can be a comfort zone. So again, it's recognizing, when is it a comfort zone? What from your childhood is there? And again, once you go on that personal journey, self-discovery, I started realizing how much as a family we were non-confrontational. So even though I knew there were things I needed and wanted to talk about, I couldn't bring it up. So again, that creates tension. So do recognize the patterns And as I always say, don't make them wrong. They are what they are. And there's something there for you to learn about. And be I think it's being comfortable with the disagreement. It's okay to disagree, but it's where it goes to afterwards, what you make out of that disagreement, is where it can fall apart and become very disempowering. So know yourself is where I start from all of this. Yeah.
So, and have you got any comment? Know thyself.
Yeah, we are very complicated people, aren't we? There's no two of us that are exactly the same. We all carry our own stuff. We all have our own ideas, our own opinions, our own beliefs, our own fears, and they play a big role in this type of thing in relationships. So, we might not be able to stand up for ourselves. We might be fearful of rejection. We might never have learned actually that we've got a voice. We might suffer from low self-worth and low self-confidence, and therefore believe that what we've got to say doesn't matter. Whatever we're bringing into that relationship, as Karen, is that self-discovery. It's about understanding what that means to us. And again, once we understand what that means to us, we can actually look at the other person that we're in these relationships with and say, okay, if I understand myself, I understand why I might do this, why I might feel the way that I do, then I can have a little better idea about what might be going on for the other person as well. So if they are constantly needing to be right, if they're constantly putting down my opinion, if they've got a space of their own which I never get any resolution from, they make me feel intimidated, or they don't know how to take criticism, or they don't even know how to take or just because I've got something to say. Again, we can try and understand that, and again, never kind of saying that it's right. Slightly different to what Carol Ann said about people not being wrong. It doesn't mean the way that people are is right. It doesn't mean it's acceptable, and it's okay for you to address it. But again, if you're fighting stuff within yourself, which is saying, I can't step up, I can't have an opinion, or again, it's vice versa. If you're kind of bickering and arguing with this person because you can't take their opinion, you can't understand why they don't just agree with you, as Nomsa said, they just don't know what you want. Carol Ann said that. So, it's that people don't know what you want. They can have a guess. They can assume that you might like an Indian, but actually you prefer a Chinese. But they're not going to know unless you speak up. Again, there's so many different things that might be stopping you from doing that. I was one of those people. People used to tell me I was so laid back I would fall over. And I was. But it was also because I didn't know how to push myself forward. So I was far too agreeable. I was far too trying to think what is going to make this other person happy. And then eventually that led me to obviously keep choosing people that I was trying to keep happy all the time. Generally, I would choose people with a lot of problems because they were never happy. So I was on this constant crusade to try and make people feel better about themselves. But in that, I lost myself. I wouldn't like to upset them. I wouldn't like to tell them what I needed. I was happy to go with the flow. But that was all a defense mechanism because I couldn't cope with the idea of rejection. I couldn't cope with the idea that actually I had anything valuable to say. And that just ended up with me being really resentful. Because after a while of playing out that role, I would get to the point where I realized that this relationship was never about me. But I was choosing somebody to make that my reality. But then it would end in bickering and arguing and a lot of destructive and emotionally violent outbursts on both sides because I was then trying to fight back, but by that time I was already in a space of resentment because I didn't think this person cared about me, and I needed more from them, and they didn't really take any notice of what I wanted and what I needed. So then I would become quite, I'd pick on them and try and get them to do things that I wanted them to do. Excuse me while I move my cat out of the way. And, and it became a big problem, and I would end up in very cyclical relationships of lots of arguments, falling out all the time because of the dynamic of of that. Because I was, these people also struggled with, self-worth and self-esteem, and then when I started to challenge the space, they didn't really know how to cope with that either. So we would just end up going around in these cycles of destruction all the time. So yeah, I think we really need to be able to find within ourselves what the issues are. Why might we find ourselves in this situation with someone if we are falling out with them on a regular basis? Is it something about me trying to avoid connectivity with them? Is it something about my safe space and what I've learned as a child that all I ever saw was fighting and arguing? So I think it's a perfectly normal space. Is it like what Nomsa said? You've said a few times that you were treated like a princess as a child. You didn't know what arguing really was. And then, that puts you into quite a difficult situation when you first start to experience disagreements and arguments with people. Your emotions are going to go, well, what's going on here? I don't know how to cope with this. And it could put you into a very defensive position, and it could either shut you down or it could make you want to go on the attack yourself, depending on what your triggers are. So it's really important, like Caroline says, this journey of self-discovery. But the benefit of a journey of self-discovery is it opens your mind up to the world outside as well. So once you can figure out yourself, it puts you into a really good position to go, actually, I can see why I do this. Now I can see maybe why they do that as well. And then you can take a step back and think of a different way, a new way, a more healthy way to address something in somebody else if it's not acceptable or appreciated by you. Doesn't mean they're going to change, however. But it'll be helpful for you to notice that space.
Thank you so much, John. I like it when you describe that. But for me, my feelings were shutting down, basically, because fighting was something that I was never used to. And it's shutting down. And that affected me, basically, for a long time, being able to express what I'm feeling. I just felt like if I shut down, that means I avoid confrontation, but inside I'll be hurting. That why can this person get me? I'm not explaining myself. I'm not explaining my desires, but at the same time, I'm expecting them to get who I am. And it was when I started getting into self-discovery, that's when I realized like everything, it starts with you. Because there was a time where my ex went, "You are not normal." I was like, "What do you mean I'm not normal?" He was like, "You don't get angry with anything. You don't get sad with anything." I think some of it is because of my culture, where I come from. When you have a little, to us, you have to be grateful. Every little thing that you have in my culture, you have to be grateful for what you have. And also, when it comes to relationship, African culture and European culture is completely different. Many, basically, women not allowed to talk back to men, but which is with my dad. I've never seen that way happening to my dad. My dad was a man that you have to express what you're feeling. Like everybody in the house, he loved us that much that he would just get up, maybe even 4 a.m., trying to find out my troubles, what bothers me. I'm thinking I want to sleep and I'm going to school. You're getting me up at 4 a.m. But in the end, I got it that he wanted to get to know me. So we that's how we build that relationship, an authentic relationship, by getting me up at 4 a.m. We have a chat about the things that are troubling me, and the things that I'm not happy, the things that I'm happy about, and the things that he can improve as a father. And basically we just leave and go to school, and I just go back to sleep, or we just go and visit family members. I go back to sleep, and then I get up when I'm going to school. So in that way, I think it was preparing me for the future, that you want to do something, you're going to have to get up early. But he was manipulating my mind, making me think he's getting to know me. So it's different. But the UK, European culture, you go to somebody Sainsbury's, oh my God, you can have it all. You can have the disagreement. You can call a man stupid. You can call them a woman stupid. You can call them all names. It's normal. But to me, because I wasn't raised here, when I see somebody telling their husband off, or a husband basically telling a woman off, calling them stupid, I'll be like, what is going on? But she's an adult. Why she's being told she's this? So it's something that I had to understand. Basically, I had to, honestly, you cannot believe this. I had to go to college, honestly, attending evening schools, trying to understand British culture, because I wanted to learn more about British culture, how they communicate, why they do things the way that they do. I had to go to college. There was evening classes. Was it evening classes or Saturday classes? I basically had to learn how, basically to understand people's feelings, because sometimes me being raised in Africa and then coming here, things are run differently. So that's when I've learned basically how to adapt to the culture, and how to, before I got into personal development, how to communicate with people, and how do you ask them, like, even like you guys is normal, like in Africa, they will just tell you the things. You don't have to ask a question. Somebody will just sit down with you as a child and start explaining to you, this is what is going on in my life. But in the UK, it's done different. You have to ask questions. So those are the things that I had to learn. To, like, if Johnny says, Nomsa, how are you? If I know that Johnny has a wife, I have to ask that Johnny's wife is fine. I have to find out, how is your wife, John? Find out from you, ask questions. But in Africa, it's different. When I see my granddad will be like, hi, Nomsa, how are you? And then I'm good, thank you. And he'll be like, oh, wow, your grandmother sends her love. She says she loves you very much. So he does all the conversations. But here, things are different. So I had to go to college to learn those things. But if I didn't, that means it would have continued affecting me in that relationship. Wherever I would have entered in relationship, that would have become a big problem.
I think you've hit a good point there, because even though you're, culturally from a different country, you have people that are from different families, different upbringing. So again, culturally, there's a difference there, so I acknowledge you for taking that time out to explore this culture here, because it is about understanding the culture and how to behave and how things are done. So there's not that confusion. And again, that's what very often spark disagreement, is confusion. And if you actually unpicked a disagreement, you'd probably find they were actually saying the same thing underneath it. I remember once, quite a few years ago now, listening to my mum and dad talking, and I could hear them getting a bit irate with each other. And I started listening to what they were saying, and I went, hang on a minute, you are both saying exactly the same thing, just using different words. And immediately it just diffused everything. And again, that comes down to language, how you communicate, what words you use. And, as I've explained before on other shows, about, are you a visual person that uses visual language? Is your partner somebody who uses kinesthetic language or auditory language? Your wording will be different, and therefore you can be actually missing what the other person's saying, not understanding, and therefore, it's a constant, but you're not understanding me. Well, basically, you're not using the words that I'm using, and that's where it all ends up. So if you can actually listen, just massage your ears around here and just go, okay, so what are the words that this other person is using? Am I using the same words? Because 9 times out of 10, you're not. And that's where then disagreements can come in. And then it gets quite angry, and then it can flip. And this is where the anger, then you're not in that rational part of the brain that can actually even hear language or, has got access to language. You're in that reactionary part of the brain, whereby it doesn't matter what you say to anybody who's in that part, operating from that part of the brain. No rational thought will stop it, and therefore that's when if you can then notice that yourself and actually just take stock and create a space of calm and just holding it rather than reacting yourself, because it just fuels it, the whole thing, if you're reacting. And that's where it can then get quite violent, and that's where it can then be hurtful with words or even get physical. So again, it's that being able to recognize it, know what to do, and just to take the energy out of it. Because once things have calmed down, it allows for you to move out of that irrational part of the brain into the higher cortex, where you've got rational thought. You can hear, you can think more clearly, and you can respond rather than react. And then you might be able to see the other person's point of view, or discuss it in a way that you can get an agreement that isn't actually what either of you were thinking of in the first place. Other possibilities open up. You just never know what can open up once you listen. When you listen. So again, it comes down to language, understanding each other's language, and what are the triggers. So that's one of my favorites, and it's something that I've really, again, on this learning, this self-discovery journey, this personal development journey, and doing a lot of around my auditory sense, because that was my weakest sense. And now I can hear words, I can hear what other people are saying, and go, oh, and it might be not, very often it's not the words I would use, but I make a point of using them. And the conversation just changes just like that. There's a connection felt. There's a feeling heard. And I think that's very often the key to disagreements, is feeling that you're being heard and understood. Yeah.
Do you have any point, John?
Yeah. So as Carol Ann was saying, we all have our own way of taking in information as well. So a couple of things to look out for is what Carol Ann was saying. If someone says "I feel," then generally they're coming from a kinesthetic or emotional space. If someone says "I think," they're generally coming from a thought-based response. I hear you. Someone can probably be coming from an auditory space. Again, so if you're an emotional person and someone's a thinking person or more of a rational person, then again, you're going to miss subtle cues. You're going to miss the levels. You're going to be coming at things from different areas, as Caroline said. So it's important that you understand where the other person's coming from, and also how we process information as well. So if I'm a person that likes to resolve things in the here and the now, and you're a person that likes to take information away and think about things, then again, we could end up having a falling out, because I'm not going to appreciate that you need time to go and process this information. So I'm going to say, hey, come on, I want an answer. And you'll be saying, oh, I can't give you an answer because I need to go and think this through. But you're not going to say that. You're going to go, all right, stop picking on me, stop bullying me, stop pushing me. And then I'm going to say, well, I need you to tell me. I'm going to think that maybe you don't care. I'm going to think that maybe, you know, that you're trying to hide something. I might think that, you know, because I have an urgency to get this resolved. So I'm going to keep pushing. And eventually you're likely to say something I don't want to hear because I'm not giving you the time and the space to process that information. So again, it's important that you learn that about each other. Are you a person that likes to resolve an issue, a problem in the moment? Do you need to talk it through here and there and right now? Or are you one of those people that goes, hang on a minute, give me a few hours, I just need to go and think about this and I'll come back to you later? Or, you know, do I even need to take a few days sometimes to process how I'm feeling about things? And again, if you know that about the other person, then you can come to some kind of agreement which works for both of you. Okay, well, I'm the kind of person, you know, that I like to talk things through right now. I like to get it resolved so I can move on. If you're a type of person that likes to think about things for a week and then come back with the answers, then maybe we need to think about meeting in the middle somewhere. You know, okay, well, let's have a couple of days. I'm just telling you how I feel today, but I need you to come back to me with a response in the next couple of days. Because if I keep trying to push you, you're not getting any kind of chance to process that information. And on the other hand as well, I might come to you with an issue and say, I don't want an answer from you right now. I'd like you to go away and think about this, but I might still go, well, I've got an answer right now because that's how I feel. And we just need to find that kind of balance between the two people. So if you match up on that, then it can be okay because you're going to resolve things in the timely fashion that you both appreciate. But if you don't, then it's going to cause a lot of problems. And I can say I've done that in the past myself. I've not been aware. I've had someone that I've been talking to and they just stared at me. And I'm like, well, what's your response to that? And they're like, and I'm like, say something. And they're like, so you need to tell me. And they're like, I don't know what to say. And why don't you know what to say? You know, and again, that just builds the friction and the tension. Things can escalate from there. And it's only because I actually didn't realise this person just didn't know what to do with that information in that moment at that time. If I'd have just said, look, go away and think about it and come back in a couple of hours and let me know what you think, probably would have been absolutely fine. We could have they'd come back with their stuff and then we could have had another conversation about it. So also, if there's a lot of stuff going on within a relationship, you usually find, if there's a lot of stress, it could be outside stress, it could be stress within the relationship. But if I want to talk to you about something, if I want to make a point about something and you're having a crappy day, the last thing you're going to want to do is to talk to me about something that's quite serious or something you're not interested in or something you don't have the time for. So if I come and start trying to talk to you about something that you don't want to talk about, then whose responsibility is that? It's mine, isn't it? Because I'm telling you I want to talk about something, I've got a problem in that moment, and you're like, sorry, my head's full of other stuff. And you're going to push me to the side, you're going to ignore me, you're going to dismiss me, you're going to give me a sharp, short answer that I'm not going to want. So again, it's also really important that we respect that within the relationship, that I might want to talk about something at that moment and you're not ready. So definitely think about maybe if there's an issue you want to discuss. I've got something's come up, I'd like to talk to you about it later on, 8 o'clock, whatever. Again, to get that person in the right frame of mind. And if they're not going to be ready at that time, it's okay for them to say so. But, if we're carrying these personal issues around fears, around rejection, around not being heard, about not having a voice, and someone says, I don't want to hear this right now, it's quite easy for that to escalate into something which it doesn't need to be.
I like what you said about somebody needing time and them just standing there looking at you, and it's like if you're somebody that wants it quick, you don't actually realize by pushing that person you're shutting them down even more. And they really can't. That all thinking's gone.
They've gone into a massively defensive space.
And it's not a nice place to be in, because I know I've often been in that place of going, oh, I don't know what to say, and it feels really uncomfortable. But and I know as a teacher, I used to say to some students, well, why can't you answer me? And they were just quiet. And it took me it was when I actually did some training in primitive reflexes and actually learned about the fear paralysis reflex, whereby you just go mute, because that fear paralysis reflex kicks in, and it's like, and they really cannot answer you. And when I learned that, I'm thinking, oh my God, what have I done? Some of these students, So that's when I was able to, in having that understanding, be aware of that possibility and be able to give someone that space, or even started to understand myself even more, why I couldn't speak in that moment, So it is again having those awarenesses. But if somebody's just looking at you blankly, they're not being stupid. What's happening is their brain is not able to process in that moment as quickly as you want it to. And that is I think it's a great point you made there, John, and brought out. It's having that awareness of people's different processing, the different levels and speeds of processing.
With someone, because you might talk to someone about something on a Tuesday, and then they'll say, oh, that thing you said last Tuesday, I was thinking about that, but it's taken them that amount of time to come back to you with their thoughts about it, because in that moment they might have just listened and nodded and gone, and then if you notice that a few days later they say, oh, that thing you said last week, it's generally, you'll find that that's the kind of person that will do that, because they've taken that information away, they've processed the information that they need to process, and then they've come back to you with their thoughts about it. So if you're in a relationship with somebody like that and you notice that, but you're the kind of person that they say something to you and you're straight on it with, oh, well, I think this and blah 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 blah, and you don't need that time to process. Again, it's just one of those things for you to notice about it.
Awareness, you're right, John. We have to be aware of what's going on, and mostly sometimes you find that people argue about something, but it's not really what they're arguing about. There's a completely feelings that they're arguing about, but because that feeling is there, so they just bring everything like, you did this, you did this. So I think sometimes it's nice to concentrate, focus on one problem at a time. It is nice.
I guess it's understanding what the real problem is, isn't it? Like I said earlier on, when I used to have relationships with people, I wouldn't really necessarily say what I wanted, and then I would get resentful, and then everything that I was resentful about would come out at one go, because I'd let all of that stuff build up inside of me, and then when I did finally say something, it was, oh, and yes, you did this and you did that, you didn't do this and you didn't do that. And it's like, well, that's been like 6 months worth of crap that I'm carrying through me. But I didn't realise how much it was, and it took that amount of emotional pressure for me to express it. But by that time, it was never going to be pleasant. It was always going to be angry. It was always going to be emotional. It was always going to be fueled with something else. And you're right, Nom. So it's learning to address one issue at a time, unless there's a similar theme to the problems that you've got. But and also at the time, or close to enough the time that it happens. Again, because if someone's one of those people that takes time to process, you might say have a conversation with them. They might not be necessarily happy with what's been said in the conversation, and they'll come back to you a few days later and say, "No, I didn't like what you said the other day," and you've gone like, "Oh, what did I say?" Because you've already moved on. That conversation's done as far as you're concerned. And then again, that can be quite irritating for some people. They go, "Oh, well, you should have said at the time, I'm not talking about this now, blah, blah, blah." And again, that causes more problems. The other person's shut down. You're irritated that they didn't say something at the time, or they weren't listening at the time, or whatever it might be. But again, it's just about taking that step back and going, okay, well, they clearly needed a few days to process that. You don't have maybe the confidence to address it at the time, like you said earlier on. They take a step back, they go into that freeze space where they just really don't know what to do with themselves at that moment, so they don't do anything at all. So yeah, again, it's just don't let things build up. If you've got a problem with something, in a space of time, make sure that you vocalize that. And if the person that you're with is not prepared to hear you, I think that's what Caroline said right at the start. If you're in that constant cycle of arguing, why are you together in the first place? Because it's clearly an unhealthy space for you to be in. And if you can't find that resolution, if you can't work on those things together, then it's never gonna be any better. So yeah, just kind of figure yourself out and take the time to figure out what the other person needs. And again, that communication is so important. When I work with my coaching clients, I say you need to ramp up the communication. Whichever way that is, you need to ramp up the communication. The communication is it's not there. You're not expressing yourself, you're not listening, you're not doing this, you're doing that. And again, it's really important that you that communication level works for the both of you.
And also taking life too serious. And I remember before, what I used to do, I used to be like, I like things done. I used to like things done in my own way. If it doesn't get done the way I want, I get really upset about it. Like Caroline talked about silent, giving your husband a silence. So I used to do that. I would just keep my silence, and I'm very upset. I don't want to talk about this. But now I'm in a place where if I need to talk about something, or if I want to ask something, it's like basically I know who I am. If a parcel arrives in the house, if it's not under my name, I don't open it. So when they come in, whoever's name, I need to know what is in there. So you got to tell me. So and that's who I am. But before, I wouldn't be myself. Or Martin's parcel comes in, or my daughter, I want to know what's in that parcel. Please share. And they know it. And they're like, just go and sit down. I'm like, I'm not going to sit down. I need to know what is going on. So if I need to find out something, or if there is something that upset me, or it has to be a good reason why I'm upset as well, because I've learned to choose my battles. Some of the things I've learned that I need to be grateful of having my family, instead of getting upset about silly things that are not worth it. It's like, I think I'm the only person that takes the rubbish bin out, but a weekend, I don't make breakfast. They make breakfast. So it works out really, really well. So instead of me upset taking the rubbish bin, I just tell them, weekend guys, you know how I like it when somebody cooks food. So they just cook. Doesn't matter about my daughter or her dad, they just cook, because I've learned to actually, because I studied a degree, I've learned to use that degree for my family, on my family. But before, I wouldn't do that. I would just say, I don't want to upset anyone. I'm just going to keep myself. But guess what? Inside, it eats you. you get depressed because you are not living that life. Like Johnny was saying, you need to get to know each other. So it is very, very important to get to know someone really, really well, and so that you know what they're doing. It's like we have tables here on the computers. Everyone has their own table. If you touch somebody's table, you have to explain why you went there. So those are the rules in the house. But I touch their things, their site, but they never know. But to me, on my computer, there are no rules. As long as you use my computer and leave it the way you found it, I'm cool with it. But with them, there are rules. So I'm teaching them that sometimes you have to loosen up a bit. So they're listening up. But I think in life we have to getting to know somebody, like you said, John, is very, very important, and get to know you as well yourself is very, very important. And that bringing that gratitude, that I'm grateful that you are in my life, that you chose me to be in your life. I think it is very, very important. And not thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow. Basically, I'm in that place where I just meditate too much. I just grateful. I take each day as it comes.
Yeah.
I don't really. I don't know. I used to worry about things, but it's just.
Well, clearly, if you need to know what's in other people's packages, you pay far too much attention to things. Like you said, though, it's that space of the unknown, isn't it? You need to know. And I guess
yes.
You just need to kind of recognise, actually, is it that important that I need to know? Like you said, it's about taking that step back and going, is this that important to me? Is this that important? Is that important? Okay, if it is, why is it that important? And if it is that important to you, yeah, you need to do something with it. But we all have our own little idiosyncrasies which drive us to do certain things in certain ways. We like things done a certain way. I had a couple that used to fall out over spoons all the time. And because the wife used to wash the dishes and she wouldn't put the spoons away. She just put the spoons on the side. And then the husband would come in and go, will you put those bloody spoons away? I've had enough of you leaving the spoons on the side, blah, blah, blah. And it was they used to fall out of it over all the time, but she wasn't important to her. It was like, oh, just leave the spoons there on the side. Yeah, it might be quite irritating when you come in the kitchen and the spoon's on the side, but I just said to him, well, what could you do about that? And he said, well, nothing. I said, well, you just put the spoons away.
If you want them away, put them away.
Yeah, just put them away. And he's like, oh, yeah, okay, that's quite simple, isn't it? I said, it's important to you, but it's not important to them. So, if it's not important to them, is this something that you want to keep fighting over? Like, yeah, no, because again, it's not that important to him. So it's like, well, it's only spoons, so just pick them up and put them in the drawer. And he was like, oh, I'll just do that then. And it was like, the problem was solved. He still didn't like the fact that she didn't put the spoons away, but he recognised it was really, in a big scale of things, it was so insignificant that all he had to do was open the drawer and put the spoons in. It was done, and that's it. But he would come out and shout and have a massive argument about it. So it's about just recognising, is that really that important? Do we need to fall out over this? No, in a lot of cases the answer is, but again, obviously, is that important then? Or if it's a pile, or it's not just the spoons, it's this and it's this and it's this, and the spoons are just an example of a bigger problem. Yeah, definitely. But in this case, it was just the fact he didn't like the spoons on the side, and he felt some way that she didn't respect what he wanted because she wouldn't do it. But she didn't care. She didn't care if the spoons were put away straight away or not. So, it's really important that we do take that step back and go, actually, it's not that important for us to fight about.
So would she actually eventually put them away?
Yeah, eventually.
So it was more a case of timing. Yeah, when she felt she wanted to do the job, rather than
she wouldn't. Sometimes
straight away.
Put them on the side and forget. And that's when he got irritated. You come downstairs and the spoons are on the side. Oh, these bloody spoons again! And that's it was just a ridiculous thing to row over. And to get upset about. but he was taking it personally. So he had a different idea about what this meant to him, and actually had no meaning to her whatsoever. She was just putting spoons there, and sometimes she'd forget to put them away. And that was it, and because it wasn't important to her.
So that there's a case there looking at each other's values, isn't it? What's important to you, and do they line up? Because if there's a mismatch of values, then again, that's where arguments can carry on.
Definitely
get set up and continue.
And again, it depends on the level of the value. It depends how important that value is to you, to whether it's something that's ever going to be okay or not.
That's right.
When he realised the meaning he was giving to the spoons, he thought, well, that's a complete waste of time. I'll just put them if I see them, I'll put them away. Done.
Lovely.
So any words of encouragement, Caroline, before we leave?
I think something you said about choosing your battles is something that's very important. I know it's something that my younger daughter has learnt. She now says, I pick my battles, she says, and it then creates for a more harmonious sort of living, and she's quite comfortable with that. But the other thing I think that you need to watch is where you hold it inside, and instead of speaking out what's there, you hold it in and it eats you up inside, which is what you were talking about, Nomsa. That's where disease and illness can then come in, because you listen to those words, it eats you up inside. You've created dis-ease in your body, and you created stress in your body. So therefore, that's where illnesses and pain and things that sometimes can't be explained. But if you go back to that root cause of what you are holding on to, resentments and that are eating you up inside, let go of them, find a way of resolving it, speak up, and you'll find that those illnesses will suddenly, you'll get better, your body will then find itself being at ease rather than dis-ease. So speak up, learn to speak up, and pick your battles.
John?
I would just like to slightly disagree with Caroline there about the word battles. Again, words are very important, as you know, being the work that you do. If I feel like I'm picking a battle, I'm getting ready for a fight. So I would just generally, people will, depending on the meaning that you give to the words, but if I'm preparing for a battle, if I'm choosing my battles, then in my mind that immediately goes to that's a fight I'm going to have. So I would just be mindful about the words that we use. So I would suggest actually is this important enough for me to address, rather than is this a battle that I need to have? Because again, it would change your state depending on how you approach somebody else, depending on the words that you're saying to yourself in your head. Again, that would mean nothing to someone else. You might say, I'm just choosing my battles, and that'll roll off your tongue and it won't mean anything at all. But it's really important that you get yourself into the right state if you're going to address something with somebody that is important to you. So that's one thing I would suggest that you do. So that again, if they're not in the right state, also be open to that as well. You say, are you okay to talk? Is this the right time for us to have a conversation about this? If not, when are you going to be free? And because there's something I want to talk about. So again, make sure that you're both in the right frame of mind to have a conversation. And the word that kind of popped into my head was curious. Is just be curious. Be curious about yourself. How do you work? How do you function? What's important to you? What isn't important to you? But also be really curious about the other person as well. By showing an interest in how they work and what they like, what they don't like, you'll be able to really kind of cement that relationship in a much more healthy way. And you'll have a much better idea of how to approach certain things with people if you have that curiosity to figure out what makes them tick.
Thank you so much, John. I'm gonna agree with Carol Ann. My battles, I choose my battles. I don't know how much I have saved my relationship where I see Martin comes in with something that the children are playing or they're just enjoying themselves and they're just coming to pick the battles. And I'm like, I didn't hear that. And they were just, because I'm teaching my children basically personal development, so they'll start defending themselves and I'm not getting involved and they tries to get involved with me and I'm like, honey, how was your day today? Give me some laugh. And that's what I've been waiting for. And I would just completely, because I know at that moment that it's not a battle. The man has been 8 hours doing 8 hours all day. And I don't think it is time for me to actually react to whatever is going on in his mind. And then I will start asking, so what is exactly is the problem? You'll be like, I'm tired. I'm like, leave the kids alone, then I'm going to sit down if you are tired. So that's what I do with what Carol Ann says, choose your battles. You'll be surprised at how much it works. And because sometimes you find somebody is arguing with you, the argument has got nothing to do with you. So I try to choose the battles at the same time. I try to dig what is going on. Why are you behaving the way you are behaving? Then I'll get the real truth of what exactly is going on. You'll be like, baby, I'm tired. I've been working all day. I'm like, why don't you just ignore the kids because they're just playing and having fun? Or I put my shoes, like you were talking about the spoon. Sometimes I put my shoes by the door. He comes in, he sees my shoes. I'm like, just ignore my shoes and go and sit down. Give me some love and go and sit down. So that is the part. But if I didn't know anything about psychology or personal development, he brings the fight. I bring it on. I'm like, bring it on. But I don't do that. I'm like, how's your day been? And he'll be like, I'm talking about the shoes. I'll be like, okay, I'm going to pick my shoes up and just give me some love. And he'll be like, you guys are annoying. I'm like, no, we're good. We're good. You're just tired, basically. So that's what happens. But me, when I'm tired, do you know what I do? I go on the sofa and lie down and leave everybody alone.
And just have any of you alone as well.
Yeah, I don't argue with anyone. That's what everyone should do. When you feel that there's something that has bothered you, communicate it. Leave blaming everybody else. When I'm tired, I never blame anyone. I just say, guys, I'll see you later. I'm going to set the alarm for half an hour and I'm just lying down. I'm not upsetting anyone because I know what needs to be done. But for me to be in that mindset, I had to work hard and I had to say, when I come on social media, I say I'm a coach, but what am I at home? I have to keep that character that I am. I have to separate my work with home. But the character, there's two characters, a NOMSA character of working, meaning business, but at home, it means fun. Business stays on the computer, on the phone, at home, it means fun. And when I'm upset, you will know about it. And once I express it, it's done. I don't want to talk about it. As long as you know how I'm feeling, I forgive and then I move on. There's no point because what I look at it is I've lost so much people in my family through death, through sickness, and I have to embrace what I have, the living ones. I have to embrace it because I've never had a chance of embracing my life like with my dad. I was so close to him. That time when he says, Nomsa, goodbye, that is the time where I don't want my family to go through. I need to enjoy the love. Like you, John and Carol Ann, Gossip Talk Show, I need to enjoy you guys. That is my character. I've got to enjoy getting to know you or having a relationship with you. If anything comes up, disagreement is fine, but I have to make sure I'm enjoying my relationship first. That's my character that I've created. So everyone, have a lovely, lovely weekend. We are here at Ngozi Talk Show Monday to Friday, 1 p.m. So if you're watching this message later, and please share some love with your loved ones and your friends. God bless you and live with grace.